They parked their SUV right in front of our ranch, blocking access to our equipment barn and making a bold statement that they weren't going to play by the rules. But this isn't just another HOA story about lawn height or fence paint. This is about land that's been in our family for 3 generations, and a battle that became very real when one homeowners association decided they wanted it badly enough to take it. My grandfather, Robert Bob Harrington, is 78 years old, a retired military engineer with decades of experience designing security systems for bases overseas. He's also a proud Texas farmer who's spent most of his life tending the soil that has been in our family for over a century. That day, he stood quietly on the porch holding a roll of electrical wire and a homemade control box, his eyes dark with quiet determination. The tension had been building for months. The Pine Meadows Estates development had been pushing boundaries for years, but parking a gleaming white Land Rover directly in front of our barn during harvest season? That was the final straw. Watching from your own HOA neighborhood? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your stories too. Because trust me, they picked the wrong family to mess with. I'm Thomas, an electrical engineer myself, and after 15 years living in the city, I finally convinced my wife Amanda and our daughter Sophie to move back to Grandpa's ranch. We wanted Sophie to grow up connected to the land like I did. It felt like the right choice until we pulled up to find that SUV sitting there like it owned the place. There were signs posted everywhere. Private property, no parking. They'd been there for years. But the vehicle had a small decal in the corner of its windshield, the logo of Pine Meadows Estates. Their message was clear. They didn't care about our property lines. Grandpa came out of the barn with that familiar look of controlled frustration. He told us they showed up early that morning, claiming the dirt road was community access land. Amanda, being a corporate lawyer, immediately started snapping pictures and reviewing the boundary records. She confirmed what we already knew. It was blatant harassment. Sophie stood nearby, wide-eyed, watching her new home turn into a war zone on her very first day. And that's exactly what it felt like, a battlefield. Not because we wanted it to be, but because someone else had decided to make it one. We tried contacting the HOA repeatedly, but got nowhere. The receptionist was unhelpful, and when I tracked down the SUV's owner, Trevor Livingston, son of one of the wealthiest families in Pine Meadows, I got an arrogant laugh through the phone. "Move my car? You're on community land, farm boy." He even threatened legal action if we dared tow it. That's when I saw something shift in Grandpa. A slight tremor in his hand. A distant stare. He's always been good at controlling his anger, but I know him better than anyone. He wasn't done with this fight, not by a long shot. He said quietly, 15 years they've been trying to buy this ranch. Now they want war. I tried calming him down, reminding him we could handle this legally. Amanda agreed. But Grandpa just looked out toward that SUV and muttered something about how the battlefield taught him how to win a war. Sometimes you have to let the enemy feel the consequences of their actions. Later that night, I saw him moving around the barn with a flashlight, carrying coils of wire, old military-grade tools, and what looked like a hand-drawn circuit diagram. I told myself he was just doing routine maintenance, but deep down I knew better. The next morning brought more trouble. Our mailbox was stuffed with fraudulent violation notices from the HOA, claiming we violated architectural guidelines, noise ordinances, and lawn standards on a working farm that wasn't even under their jurisdiction. Amanda spread them out on the table, sorting them like case files. "This is harassment," she said flatly. And she was right. Grandpa explained how it all started 15 years ago when Pine Meadows was just getting built. Deborah Montgomery, then a hungry real estate broker, made an insulting offer for the ranch. When he refused, strange things began happening: equipment failures, anonymous complaints, subtle sabotage. It never rose to the level of provable crime, but it was relentless. Amanda dug deeper and found something worse: plans for an ultra-exclusive resort section of Pine Meadows on our land. They had already pre-sold the idea to investors. They needed our property, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to get it. Our neighbor Olivia Rodriguez stopped by with a basket of food, though it felt more like a peace offering. She shared her own horror stories, how the HOA targeted residents they considered undesirable, especially Latino families like hers. Her vegetable garden was fined $300 for being unsightly. Then Sheriff Callahan showed up with news that the HOA had filed a complaint accusing us of polluting the area with our farm operations. A completely baseless claim. He warned us they were pushing hard for something. As we talked, two figures approached from the direction of the SUV, Deborah Montgomery herself, now HOA president, and Warren Prescott, the development director. They were taking photos of our property, standing just beyond what they thought was the boundary line. Grandpa walked over calmly. "You're on private property," he said, pointing to the clearly marked signs. "Please remove that vehicle and leave." Deborah gave him a thin smile. "Mr. Harrington, the board believes this area needs improvement. It would be much easier if you accepted our generous offer." The condescension in her voice made my blood boil. Warren chimed in with fake concern. "Property values are rising dramatically. We can make this process pleasant or not." Amanda, ever prepared, was recording everything. When Warren noticed, his mask slipped. But Amanda calmly reminded him that Texas is a one-party consent state, and they were trespassing anyway. Sheriff Callahan gave Grandpa a warning. "Don't do anything that'll make me have to arrest you." Grandpa laughed without humor. "I'm just an old man taking care of my farm. But in Texas, we protect what's ours." "My father did it. I'll do the same." That night, I watched through Sophie's bedroom window as Grandpa and Sophie worked together in the barn, surrounded by flashlights and electronic components. They were building something: cameras, warning signs, a perimeter system. I should have been worried. But instead, I felt pride. My daughter was learning from her grandfather, absorbing not just technical skills, but the quiet strength that defined our family for generations. Whatever came next, we were ready. The next morning revealed Grandpa's overnight handiwork. Along our property boundary, new signs had appeared: private property, monitored areas alongside what looked like security cameras mounted on posts and corners of the barn. Some were clearly decoys, but others bore the unmistakable look of real surveillance equipment. I examined one of the mounts more closely. "Dad, is this really necessary?" I asked, half joking. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just gave me that meaningful glance of his, the kind that said more than words ever could, and pointed toward the property line. Two more luxury vehicles had joined Trevor's white SUV, completely blocking access to the equipment barn during one of the most critical times of the harvest season. The message from the HOA was clear: they weren't backing down. Amanda spent the morning deep in research, confirming what we already suspected: the Pine Meadows Homeowners Association had no legal authority over our land. "They operate on intimidation," she explained, spreading out pages of property law across the kitchen table. "People usually just pay the fines because it's easier than fighting. That's how they stay unchecked." But Amanda wasn't about to let them steamroll us. She began compiling meticulous documentation: every false violation notice, every trespassing incident, every boundary marker dispute. Meanwhile, George Bennett, a Pine Meadows resident who'd grown disillusioned with the HOA's tactics, reached out with some inside intel. He met us secretly at a small diner outside town and spilled everything. "They've been manipulating votes to pass rules specifically targeting your property," he told us. "It's all part of Deborah's playbook: harassment until you're too exhausted to resist." Grandpa took a different approach to retaliation. It started simple. Each morning, he released a few chickens near the property line. Perfectly legal on agricultural land, but maddening for the neighbors unaccustomed to rural life. The sound of clucking and the occasional wandering bird became an unexpected thorn in their side. Meanwhile, Sophie made a discovery from her bedroom window. She came running into the house, clutching her binoculars. "Dad, there's someone watching the ranch," she whispered, showing me photos she'd taken of a man in plain clothes standing at a distance, observing our property. His presence added a new layer of unease to an already tense situation. Things escalated dramatically that afternoon when Trevor showed up again, this time with friends. They threw eggs at our barn and house, laughing and filming the whole thing on their phones. "How's farm life treating you, hillbillies?" Trevor shouted, dripping with entitlement. I called Sheriff Callahan immediately, but his response was frustratingly vague. "Without clear evidence, it's hard to pursue charges," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "The Livingstons have a lot of influence around here." But as it turned out, Sophie had been one step ahead. With Grandpa's guidance, she'd installed one of our real cameras facing the area where the harassment happened. The high-definition footage caught everything: Trevor and his friends trespassing, vandalizing, and mocking us. "They didn't even notice the camera hidden in the birdhouse," Sophie said proudly as we reviewed the damning video. Amanda immediately drafted a formal threat of legal action: trespassing, vandalism, harassment. When I showed the footage to the sheriff the next day, his demeanor shifted. "This is actionable evidence," he admitted. "But Thomas, be careful. There's something bigger going on here. The HOA isn't just after your land. They've got something else planned." His warning stayed with me as Grandpa and I dove deeper into designing a more sophisticated defense system for the ranch. We worked late into the night, using military-grade encryption protocols and remote monitoring systems. As we tinkered, I noticed something in Grandpa. His hands occasionally trembled, his eyes grew distant. "During the war," he finally said, "the noise, the pressure, sometimes they still come back." He paused. "But I'm not on a battlefield anymore. We're protecting our family in our own way." That evening, Deborah Montgomery showed up at our door with what she probably thought was a final offer. "We're prepared to offer market value for the property," she stated confidently. But the number she named was barely 60% of what the ranch was worth. Amanda, always ready, countered with a detailed property assessment proving just how insulting the offer was. Deborah's mask slipped slightly. "You people don't understand what you're up against," she warned. "This land will be developed. The only question is whether you'll profit from it or be buried in legal fees." Her threat hung in the air long after she left. For the first time, I found myself wavering. "Maybe we should consider our options," I suggested to Amanda that night. If the HOA had the political connections the sheriff implied, this could get expensive and ugly. The thought of dragging Sophie through years of conflict weighed heavily on me. To my surprise, Grandpa didn't object. Instead, he spoke with quiet understanding. "You have to think about your wife and daughter," he said gently. Then he shared a story I'd never heard before about how his father had faced a similar decision when developers wanted to build a dam through our land. "He won, son," Grandpa said, eyes twinkling, "through patience, intelligence, and unexpected allies." His words reignited my resolve. This wasn't just about land. It was about legacy, about home, about Sophie's future. Later that night, I overheard Grandpa speaking to Sophie in the barn. "You see this boundary map? Your great-grandfather drew these marks," he told her. "Tomorrow, they'll learn their first lesson about provoking a military engineer." As they emerged carrying small electronic components, I noticed something strange: a small tracking device attached to the underside of a fence post. Someone was monitoring us, but it wasn't clear if it was the HOA or someone else entirely. What was becoming increasingly clear, however, was that this conflict was far more complex than a simple property dispute. The next morning, Grandpa was already up and working by the time I stepped outside. He moved with the methodical precision that had defined his military career, testing equipment and adjusting wires. By the time I joined him, he'd already installed warning signs around the perimeter: electric fence, danger, keep out. Each sign had a serial number and permit date, perfectly legitimate under Texas agricultural law. "Dad, are we really installing an electric fence?" I asked, examining one of the professionally printed signs. He adjusted his cap and squinted against the morning sun. Private property in Texas allows for electric fences to contain livestock, he said calmly. We have chickens, don't we? There was that glint in his eye again, the one that both worried and reassured me. Whatever he was planning, he'd already thought through every possible angle. Trevor's white Land Rover remained parked defiantly in front of our barn entrance, now joined by 2 more luxury vehicles bearing Pine Meadows parking permits. The blockade was costing us valuable time during harvest season, exactly as they'd intended. Amanda documented everything meticulously, building a case for financial damages caused by their harassment. By mid-morning, we had an unwelcome visitor. Philip Barnes, the HOA's attorney, arrived in an impeccably pressed suit despite the heat. "Mr. Harrington," he called out, waving a stack of papers. "We need to discuss these alarming signs you've installed." Thomas recorded the entire exchange while Amanda took notes. Grandpa calmly explained the perfectly legal status of electric fences on private agricultural land, producing the necessary permits with remarkable readiness. All documentation was in order, he stated firmly, standard protection for livestock. Barnes' professional demeanor faltered slightly. "If anyone is injured due to your deterrence methods, you'll face serious liability issues." Grandpa's response was measured but firm. "Then don't touch my fence." The confrontation ended in a stalemate, with Barnes retreating to report back to Deborah. Meanwhile, Amanda had uncovered something huge, evidence that Deborah had bribed a local official to alter zoning documents. George provided supporting proof, strengthening our position in case legal action became necessary. That afternoon, Trevor returned with his friends to retrieve his SUV. Rather than simply leaving, they deliberately damaged a section of our boundary fence and mockingly pretended to be electrocuted by the warning signs. "Look at me, I'm being electrocuted." Trevor laughed, grabbing the fence while his friends filmed for social media. "Fences operate on schedules," Grandpa remarked quietly from the porch. "To conserve electricity. Farmers are always economical." Trevor dismissed the comment with a rude gesture and approached his SUV, pulling out his keys with theatrical flair. "Watch this," he announced. "I'll park here every day just to piss off the country bumpkins." What happened next was pure engineering genius. Grandpa and I had designed a simple but brilliant system overnight. A remote-controlled circuit connected to the SUV's metal frame. An Arduino microcontroller monitoring electrical parameters. A phone app to ensure safety. A small transmitter installed beneath the vehicle using magnetic coupling. And a current limited to 12 volts at 3 milliamps, just enough to be noticeable, but completely safe. As Trevor sat in the driver's seat and pressed the start button, nothing happened. He frowned and tried again. At that exact moment, Grandpa pressed a button on a small remote that looked exactly like a standard garage door opener. On my phone, the monitoring app displayed, activated. Suddenly, the entire metal frame of the SUV came alive with a mild electric current. Trevor yelped and leapt from the vehicle as if the seat had burst into flames. "What the hell?" he screamed, jerking his hand away from the handle as he tried to close the door. "What did you do to my car?" he demanded, his voice cracking with humiliation as his friends' laughter turned on him. He hadn't just been pranked, he'd been outsmarted. And somewhere behind the scenes, the war for our land was just getting started. Trevor stumbled back from the SUV, shaking his hand like he'd touched a live wire, ironically, not far from the truth. His friends stopped laughing. One of them even dropped his phone in shock. "What the hell did you do?" Trevor shouted, voice cracking as he glared at Grandpa. "You fried my car." Grandpa didn't flinch. He just stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Nope," he said simply. "Your car works just fine. You're just not used to consequences." I couldn't help but smile. The system we built was brilliant, completely safe, perfectly legal, and psychologically devastating to someone who thought they could walk all over us. Amanda, ever the strategist, stepped forward with her phone already recording. That was trespassing, harassment, and attempted vandalism, she said coolly. And now, Mr. Livingston, you've got a choice. You can either move your vehicle and leave our property peacefully, or I start sending this footage to every lawyer I know. Trevor looked around, realizing for the first time that he wasn't surrounded by people who had any reason to protect him. His friends were backing away slowly, eyes darting between the electric fence warning signs and the calmly smug look on Grandpa's face. He muttered something under his breath, stormed off toward his SUV, and peeled out of our driveway in a cloud of dust and humiliation. That night, we sat around the kitchen table, going over everything we had: video evidence, documentation of their violations, proof of bribery attempts, and now, undeniable footage of their intimidation tactics. This is more than enough to file a restraining order against trespassing, Amanda said confidently. And if we play this right, we might even get the county to investigate Pine Meadows Estates for abuse of power. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee like nothing unusual had happened. They'll be back, he said. But next time, they'll think twice before testing us. The next morning, the white Land Rover was gone. So were the other vehicles. The blockade had been broken. Over the following weeks, things quieted down. The HOA stopped sending false violation notices. Deborah Montgomery avoided eye contact when we saw her in town. Even the Pine Meadows residents started treating us with more respect. Some even came up to thank us for standing up to the board. Sheriff Callahan stopped by one evening, bringing a six-pack and a rare smile. "You handled yourselves well," he said. "People around here are starting to talk about how not everyone backs down, how some folks still fight for what's theirs." We knew the battle wasn't completely over. There would always be pressure, new threats, maybe even another attempt someday. But we were ready. Sophie had grown through it all, more confident, more connected to the land and to her roots. She spent afternoons helping Grandpa fine-tune the security system, asking questions about circuits and code like a true Harrington engineer. As for me, I realized something important. Home isn't just a place. It's the people who protect it, the values that hold it together, and the legacy you pass on to the next generation. And standing on that porch, watching the Texas sun dip below the horizon, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Because no matter what happens next, we proved one thing beyond doubt. This land isn't just ours because of property lines. It's ours because we fought for it. Together.